happy to be here with Katy Dunne, and I'm going to introduce you to her. She is a community dance artist and a trainee dance movement psychotherapist. And we're just going to have a conversation about the work she does. And what I love about speaking to people like Katy is that they're just as passionate about I am about wanting to help people. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of scenario when people are coming to you with, the challenges that you face in modern day life. And Katy is very passionate about the work she does. And I just really wanted to share with you her amazing experiences of what she's doing and how she helps people. So I'm going to hand you over, and I want to welcome Katy. And if you could just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hello, Claire. Hi, my name is Katy, as Claire said, and I am a community dance artist. So I've worked in the field of community dance for a very long time, maybe 20 years plus. And I've just always enjoyed working with people with challenges. So I work with people with learning disabilities, people with mental health problems, vulnerable young children. So I'd like to use dance to help build their confidence and their self-esteem, sense of self-worth, and their ability to express themselves. But more recently, I've trained as a dance movement psychotherapist, which is something I've always wanted to do, but the opportunity kind of came up more recently. And that's really what I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about today. The two come very close, being a community dance artist and a dance movement psychotherapist. But there's a few differences. And that's what I'd like to talk to you more about today.
Amazing. So, Katy, what was your main inspiration, would you say, around following this work that you are now doing?
Well, I have always loved to dance. Since being a child, I used to put on my Madonna records and roll around the floor for hours. It just always made me feel really good. But I was not a very technical dancer. I wasn't going to get into the best groups, but I just loved expressing myself, and I had a real natural ability to do that. And I realized that it was a way for me to really express myself and help myself feel better. I'm also dyslexic, so sometimes words weren't enough for me to be able to really explain what I wanted. So just listening to music and movement, and from my own experience, is kind of my inspiration. But then seeing how it's helped other people when I work with them, that inspires me as well, just seeing how much other people get from being able to move, not necessarily to be a professional dancer, but just because we all have this kind of innate ability to move, and it makes us all feel good. So I draw my inspiration from my own experience and from the benefits that I see that it brings to others.
Yeah. And I can really relate to that because, I'm not a professional dancer or anything, but I do like to dance. And I do remember times in my teens when I just have this piece of music, and it literally was like nobody was watching, and I just allowed the music to move my body. And the feeling, the euphoria you can get from that is quite phenomenal. And you just feel so much more in tune with yourself, and you just feel calmer and just really genuinely really happy. So I totally can have that experience, just from, probably my party days, but just in those.
Yeah. And we lose that as we get older. We don't make time for that in our lives anymore. And that's what I'm really excited about, getting people back in touch with that inner teenager and finding that again.
Oh, amazing. So Katy, with regards to like a session, if you were having a session with you, whether it's in a one-to-one or a group session, what would someone expect to experience? And can you just share a bit more about that with me?
No session is exactly the same, because you really work with what's in front of you and what the client brings for you that day. But there are certain things that would be generic. So we'd usually always start off with, so we start in a circle if you're in a group, or sitting down together one-to-one, and just asking that person to talk about how they're feeling that day. And if they say, you know, they might say, well, today I'm feeling really sad. And then you'd say, oh, where do you feel that in your body? Or can you show us a movement for sadness? And then maybe they would do something for sadness, and then you maybe do it with them. And that kind of enables you to feel more somatically how that person is feeling. And then from there, it really is very much improvisational based. So it could be that you both move together, or it might be that I watch the client move. I'm sort of witnessing their movement, which we call sort of authentic movement, so they're very natural movement. Or they maybe watch me. Maybe I'm reflecting one of their feelings with my body, and it gives them a chance to see their story in my body. And we do lots of different things, and then it can involve props. So you might work with a scarf or a lycra square or feathers. It can be really playful. So a lot of the time sessions can be really fun and quite cathartic. So it's about just letting go of all of the stresses that you've got and just finding that in a child and having some play. But sometimes it can be really emotional, and it can involve music. Sometimes it doesn't. And then usually we're looking for what images come up for the client when they're moving. So connecting with like the unconscious, you know, what images come up, what metaphors. So for example, recently when I was in a dance movement session, a couple of guys, I saw them as like a monster. So that was a metaphor, I realized later on, for something else in my life. But usually what happens is that you, after the movement session, you write or you draw. And again, that helps you get greater understanding from what just happened. And then you come back together and you verbalize it. So that's a really important part of it, sort of verbalizing it and trying to make understanding of what happened in the session. Yeah, so that just gives you a little bit of an overview of what it might look like. And there's certain things that we do, but I won't say too much more, but hopefully that gives you enough of an idea.
Definitely gives us an overview. And if you think about, you know, when you're young children and you see young children, one of the things that they use most powerfully is the fact that they will use their physical body to express themselves if they can't verbally have the words, especially when they're toddlers. You know, I remember even in my own children, they might suddenly just lie down on the floor and flip their arms around because they don't know how to verbally express. And that's kind of like their way of expressing that they need your help. Or another example I know that is things like lots of children love to spin around because it helps them feel centered and calmer. Or they might kind of sway. That's another thing that kids might use.
That's nurturing.
Way of calming.
And often in like our society, if a child's having a tantrum, we want them to stop. But actually, it's about allowing them to have that moment to express themselves. And I did a lot of work with boys with emotional behavioural problems. And it was like, well, what does anger look like? How do we feel that in our bodies? And we did lots of work with the drum and letting the anger have a voice in the space and knowing that that's okay. It's not about trying to hide it and act in a certain way that we think is acceptable, but actually given them space to express that means that then when they go back in the classroom, they're able to kind of focus better and leave that behind.
And it's really important for them to, you know, as we're talking about children, for them to really understand that it's actually okay to express yourself, even if it is anger. It's really important. You know, I know, you know, some of our grandparents were taught and brought up with, you know, you sit at the table and you don't speak. So you're not having a voice, but you're sitting there, you know, and you end up, you can see the rigidity in their bodies. So
exactly, you get suppressed.
And it is, and it shows up later in life. So it's really, really of great value to really recognize all of those kind of emotions, and like you said, giving feelings, movement, words to it, whichever that is. So absolutely amazing.
Another example I can give is the work that I've done with some boys is they were in a very masculine environment. and we couldn't even call it dance therapy. I had to call it movement therapy, because once I said dance by accident after about 6 months of working with them. They were like, "We're not dancing." But I actually I gave them the opportunity to move around like fairies, and we worked with feathers and lightweight and kind of being in touch with their more feminine side, which had really been suppressed, and they absolutely loved it. And that creative feminine side of themselves needed a voice as well, and I think they found that really nurturing to be able to do that.
Yeah, what did you notice the impact of that? You know, did you get some feedback about, you know, even just from them or any of the, you know, the adults around them, that they noticed anything? Is there anything particular you could sort of share with us?
Well, I think it does help them regulate their emotions more. The main benefit, I think, of working with them was just to help them feel more connected with their bodies. So they had a lot of problems with rage. Yeah. So just really connecting more to know what it feels like and when it's coming, and having a positive place to let that out. Yeah. Just really help them on their day.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds amazing. Okay, so if I was working with you, Katy, so let's say in a one-to-one session, how many kind of sessions, you know, on average? I know it's very much client-led, so it depends on, you know, what the client presents you with and for how long, but in as a guide, how long would you expect to work with someone on a one-to-one?
Well, it really does depend on what setting you're working with in, and who you're working with, and whether it's funded or or if it's a private client. But as a sort of guide, I would always sort of, in England, we're very much like, oh, you only get 6 weeks if it's something that's statutory. But for dance movement psychotherapy, you know, it is psychotherapy, so you do want longer to be able to go a little bit deeper. So I would say minimum of 12 weeks. But for example, some people would want to keep continuing if it's a group. So I run a Dance for Wellbeing group, and people have continued. I originally started it off as a 10-week course, but everyone wanted to come back. So it was, rather than a prevention, it was a part of their sort of well-being package, because they just got so much from it, and because it was sociable. So now we're going into our 3rd year, and it's kind of like the same people, and occasionally we get new people come and join the group, but that's really lovely as well. So it can be like a long-term ongoing thing, or you could do minimum of 12 weeks or 6 months, you know, depending on what your problem is. And I would say group work, if you want to work with people that maybe have a similar issue to you, so that can bring a lot of comfort to meet someone that's in the same situation. And then one-to-one, if it's, you know, very personal and you don't feel ready to share it, and then maybe eventually going into a group. And then even when you finish your group psychotherapy, I would really recommend then finding a community dance group to join, or something. Maybe it's not the dance you've enjoyed, maybe it's the writing element or the drawing, like finding something that still keeps that creative element going for you, even once you've finished your treatment.
Yeah. See, I think that's really amazing that you know, when you do a one-to-one session, the importance I see in the value of being able to continue your own personal journey, because life is not just like that. You're going to go through roller coasters, and to be able to just, you know, have those one-to-one sessions and then to stop, because life doesn't do that. It changes all the time. Being able to have that to follow up with, and then even, you know, just going, like you said, joining another creative type of group on a regular basis can just help keep you in that state, and that you've done all of that amazing work together, and it just helps support you on that, you know, life's journey, really. So I really
exactly. It's part of your well-being package, isn't it, of staying well, you know?
Yeah. And self-care, I mean, that's the biggest, you know, it's all very much of a big buzzword, isn't it, self-care, and people are starting to recognize the importance of that. And I think that is part, you know, what you do, even in just joining a dance group, is part of that self-care for you, because it does make you feel so much better as part of your own well-being.
Absolutely.
And it has a ripple effect, doesn't it? I mean, we're mums, so we know what it's like. We don't look after ourselves. The ripple effect is is pretty crazy. And you
Yes.
can really sense it. So, you know, we know the value of that. It's really important. So what would you say are the greatest benefits of you know, working with the dance movement psychotherapist?
Okay, so Claire, so let's say,
Yeah.
you haven't. Did you want me to talk about the 3 different kind of ideas behind the theory behind it first?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me.
Yeah,
Yeah, that will be cool.
and
Where's
then it was the benefits, which are kind of crossover of it
Oh, yeah,
anyway.
sorry, I did actually. I put it up above, and then I've just realised I put an arrow to say no. After. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for sharing, you know, a bit more about what you do and what it might look like. So can you just like give us an overview of what the sort of the theories and the ideas are around, you know, dance movement therapy and what you do?
Of course. So I suppose each therapist will have their own things that they're really drawn to in dance movement psychotherapy as well, because there's quite a few different theories. But for me, I think because I am a creative person, I'm really drawn to just how creative expression is a way to access your unconscious. And so that can be anything, but for me it is movement, because that's my way of working with people. And the other day I was reading a lovely book which really rang true to me, and it kind of described everyone as having a secret garden inside themselves, like deep down inside. And I suppose that garden represents our true selves, and within that garden we've got a shady part, we've got a light part, we've got beautiful flowers, we've got rotten and spiky flowers. And some people don't know their garden very well. Some people do anything not to visit their garden because it's not an easy place for them to go. Some people don't ever let anyone else in their garden. But I believe that everyone's garden needs to be nurtured, and actually by entering it and going to it, we're going to let everything be looked after and watered and nurtured, and everything has potential to bloom and blossom. So the creative arts are a way into that unconscious, a way root into our true self, a way to connect to our garden and feel happy in our garden, so we can visit it in a safe way and allow each seed to grow and reach its full potential. So I suppose that's the main thing for me, is just connecting to that creative part of ourselves to connect to our true self.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that I'm really passionate about is the fact that it's non-verbal. So I do quite a lot of work with people with learning disabilities, children that would really struggle in a kind of standard therapy with just verbalizing. So I'm really passionate about how dance enables those people to really express themselves. And also sometimes talking directly, even for adults, is too painful, or they're not consciously aware of what it is anyway. So by using movement, again, we're accessing the unconscious, but it's a sort of safer way for people to express themselves. So for example, you know, I might work with a child who is moving like a robot, who has no feelings, and I'm trying to look at what might that tell me about that child. And I might know that he's got a history of neglect, and it might tell me that he's really lonely. And through the dance and through the play, we'll work on his ability to form relationships and feel safe within the relationship. So that's all happening without being verbal. And sometimes you might say to them at the end, "Oh, is that how you feel?" Sometimes you might not. Sometimes it's enough to keep it within the metaphor and within the play, but it still eventually has the same effect, and it allows people to explore things in a non-verbal way. So that's the other kind of theory that I like. And then the final one, which is kind of the standard one for dance movement psychotherapy, is that it integrates the whole person. So like the mind, body, emotions. So we know that when we're sad, you can tell when someone's sad, someone's happy, someone's stressed before we even talk to them, because we see it in their body, don't we? And sometimes as dance movement therapists, you do a lot of movement observations. That's a big part of it. And sometimes you work, like I was saying, from the inside out, but sometimes you work from the outside in. So you might try, I've had some clients that are very, very narrow like this. And rather than finding out what that's about, my intervention is to try and get them to expand.
Yeah.
And they won't maybe do that straight away. They physically can't. But through lots of sessions, you work towards that, and you see the transformation over time, and it's absolutely brilliant. So it's about building like a safe space to slowly try and get them to build their sense of self, own their bodies, increase that mind-body connection. So yeah, that's another thing that we do, a lot of looking at movement, and we look at rhythms. You were talking about swaying, so we might use a swaying rhythm to help someone feel more relaxed and nurtured. You use lots of different rhythms, and movement observations is another thing that's really part of the theory behind it.
And what I think with just what you were saying, Katy, that just something that really, really highlighted to me is earlier on, we were obviously talking about children. And I mean, that's one of my areas of expertise anyway. But something as with me, when I work with adults, the one thing is the most common thing that goes back for me in the type of therapy I do. But what I'm hearing and what you say is it goes back to that inner child, that nurturing need of safety, certainty, and all of those kind of experiences that you experience as a child, whether you're an adult or not. It literally does take you back into that space. So
if you didn't have that as a child, you can then develop that within the therapeutic relationship, and then you're learning a positive relationship, an attachment that you can then hopefully build on your future, so you don't have to repeat the patterns that you had from your own childhood, which I know is stuff that you do as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, but I just love the way you use movement within that. So the work I do, they have those like you say, cathartic experiences, and they physically feel the emotion. They might cry more, you want them to cry more, because they're finally releasing that emotion. So if that's happening in movement as well, when you see animals, when they're in a fear state, if they're being chased, like a deer's being chased by a lion, the first thing they do is they run. So that's their runaway type mechanism. But then as soon as they're in safety, they immediately just calm down, and they suddenly just go back straight into relax mode. Now human beings don't tend to do that. They tend to hold into it. So they then become, like you said, they could become like a robot, or they could become very rigid. They couldn't even expand their arms out. I really love about the fact that you're using that movement to release those physical.
Help release it, let it out. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, you did say the word somatic. So could you just share what that means, for people that don't know?
Yeah, it really just means body.
Yeah.
Somatic, body. So like body-mind connection. And when you're talking about like an animal and animals, there's a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and it's really good, and it's about that. And there's a lot which I will tell you about later, but there's a lot more stuff that you can read up on about that. And animals also, I was listening to a podcast the other day that they shake it out, and that helps them get rid of it. But we don't do that, or we kind of suppress that. We want someone to stay still, and actually we need to go through those physical processes, and because otherwise we just stay in our survival mode. So it's kind of getting people out of that mode as well.
Great. Okay, so what would you say now, understanding the whole method of what you do, what are the main, would you say, the benefits? There are obviously lots of benefits, but just in a generalization, what would you say the main benefits are?
Well, I definitely think through dance movement psychotherapy, learning to listen to our bodies more is so important. So on like a really simple level, we do this every day. We need the toilet, so we go to the loo. We can feel our bladder feels full, so we go to the toilet. Our tummy rumbles and we're hungry. But it can go a lot deeper than that. And I think as a society, we've become very cognitive, so very brain orientated, and we ignore our bodies a lot. They can be a little bit inconvenient. So through doing movement and dance and really listening in, we can have a stronger relationship with our bodies and start to listen to them more. So if you're always got a headache, you know, it might not be a medical reason. Obviously go to the doctors first, always look at that option first. But it might be that your emotions aren't very happy. It's something that you're doing. So for example, you might be in a relationship with someone, but you don't want to have sex anymore. This is a client that I, without giving names, and that for me is your body telling you that perhaps your body knows that you don't love that person anymore, but your mind, your brain isn't willing to kind of catch up with that yet. So by kind of really trying to listen to our instincts, we can become more true to ourselves. And I suppose that's what we all want in the end. We all want to be an authentic person and really listening to our everyday needs. And the body is really intelligent. So if you're really stressed and tight all the time, you know, that's not how we should be. So you have to look deeper as to why that is. Or if we're constantly in a state of anxiety, that isn't right either. So is it because we're in the wrong job, or we're not sort of following our true path? So I think through doing dance movement psychotherapy, you can become much safer and happier in your body. And you know, when you have had a trauma, especially something that's physical, your body can feel like a very unsafe place. And a way that we cope is we disassociate. So some people actually physically leave their bodies when they're going through a trauma, sort of they can see themselves. Or sometimes you just don't quite feel like you're here. But working very gently and slowly over time, allowing you to be safe in your body. You need to feel safe in your body because we are with our bodies all the time. So working with a professional to feel comfortable and safe in your body and listening to your body, I think is a massive benefit. So to integrate the mind and body as one.
Yeah. So it's a really massive.
And then,
go on.
Yeah.
So it's really massive sense of awareness. That's one of the biggest keys, isn't it? First of all, it's actually stating that awareness. Are you really aware that, you know, holding your shoulders up is not normal? Because some people think that's normal. So getting people to really recognize that their awareness, like you said, that connection with their inner bodies is absolutely, in a way, the fundamentals of the base of any kind of starting point, just to be able to help that person explore and take their journey through their healing process.
I think so many of us people just carry on. We live in such a very stressful, busy environment. And people work through pain, and actually the body's given you pain to tell you to stop and listen, not to keep pushing through. And I know that's stuff that I've done with you before as well. It's there for a reason, and we need to look at it a little bit deeper sometimes.
I've totally experienced that myself. I remember, you know, very often my husband I would suddenly come down with the flu out of nowhere, and it wasn't until, you know, Chris would say, Claire, you've been doing so much. I said, you know, listen to yourself. And that was that for me. I mean, I'm really not like that anymore. I totally am so much more aware. But I feel so fortunate and grateful that I do have that awareness, because there are so many people who don't recognize it, like you were just saying, Katy. And I know you've experienced it yourself. And as we go through this journey, this awareness is absolutely key.
Absolutely. And then the other things that I would say would be this idea of going back to this idea of being inside a garden, and you really want to help each person just really get to know themselves well, so each of their flowers can have a chance to bloom. And I suppose I really believe that everyone has got a full potential to reach, and a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about are inspired by the psychoanalyst Jung. So I really like Jung, and he talks about how we all have a shadow, we have a light, we all have a mother type in us, or we all have a warrior, and all of these different things are valid, and actually, but we all have this potential to be our true self and our best self, I suppose. I don't really like that expression, but but reach your true potential. And I feel like by people doing it, or lots of types of therapy, but within dance therapy, you can really help someone get in their garden, get to know themselves better, and follow the path that they want to follow in life, and find what it is that they should be doing. Like, I know this is what I believe, this is what I'm here for to do. And I believe everyone's got their purpose, and by connecting to themselves in a deeper way, they're gonna find that out. It's not everyone knows what it is they want to do, and it's not through any fault of their own. It's just having the chance to dig a little bit deeper can help them realize that.
I agree with you, and that's why, you know, I'm a therapist myself, but I have that massive sense of value for other people that are so passionate about, like you are. I love the way you describe the garden, because it really resonates with me. I happen to use the diamonds. I call it the shining diamond of potential, and has similar kind of metaphors. You know, the strength, you know, what a diamond represents is love, connection, strength, and all of those kind of things. So I totally understand where you come from. It's just amazing to see how passionate you are about what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Katy, what kind of resources would you kind of share with some people that you hold? You've already talked about Jung, which is, you know, one of my favorites as well. What else would you recommend for people to read?
Well, I'm talking about somatic experiencing. The word somatic. There's something called somatic experiencing. If you're really interested, maybe less into the dance aspect, but just interested in the body and physical feelings, then I would recommend Dr. Peter Levine. And he's got lots on that, and he runs like online courses that you can do and weekend retreats. He's really knowledgeable in that area. I also really love Gabor Mate. He talking about the body will give you the flu if you don't stop. You know, he's actually he's a doctor, a physician, but then he became a doctor of the mind as well. And he says he's got a book called The Body Keeps a Score, which has got like countless stories of people becoming unwell, and he believes the root cause of it was because they weren't living their true life, they weren't living authentically, because they were suppressing big parts of themselves, which may be to do with their childhood, mainly. Really, he talks about that a lot, but it's so interesting. So if you're really interested in kind of illness and that side of it, The Body Keeps a Score. In England, we have a guy who's getting more and more popular called Mark Walsh. He does an online thing called the Embodiment Conference, and he's very much, he kind of looks at all walks of embodiment, everything. So embody meaning being in your body in the sort of basic form. And he has loads of free stuff, so I'd really recommend that. Recently I read a really nice book called Body Wise, and again this was a doctor. She sounds like such a great doctor. Rachel Abram, she's called, Rachel Carlton Abram. She's American, and she talks a lot about listening to your body again. And when her clients came to see her in her surgery, she teaches them to meditate so they can be more in touch with their body and their instincts. And again, there was loads of anecdotal stories in that, so they're really accessible to read. Mindfulness is a big part of what I do. I think, like we were saying, that awareness, being in the moment is all just so useful techniques. So I'd look at John Kabat-Zinn, who kind of made mindfulness quite Western and accessible, and he's got loads of books. In terms of dance movement psychotherapy, England it's called ADMP, which is the Association for Dance Movement Psychotherapy, and they will, on their website, they have information about training courses where you can study to be a dance movement psychotherapist, or just weekend courses that you could do. most countries will have their own body or association, and in America it's called the Dance Therapy Association, because they don't call it psychotherapy, but it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, have different wording. I'm very familiar with that. So, oh, amazing. So, Katy, I'm just going to ask you a couple of really, quick questions. Just what would you say is something that you would like to dispel as a myth around what you do?
Okay. I think there's probably two things. I've heard some people say, oh, that's just really fluffy. They need proper therapy. And I try not to take offense, because I think they're saying that because they have got their own problems, they're protecting themselves in a way. And I think, it's really valuable. It's helped me, and I think it has the potential to help lots of people. And fluffy, yeah, maybe you could think of creativity being fluffy, but it's still valid, and there's a part of us all that we need to welcome. And then the other one is, people think they need to be able to dance to do dance therapy, or they think they need to be a dancer, but actually that's not true. I believe that everybody has the ability to dance. When we're babies, if the music goes on, we all bounce, don't we? And it's over time that we become self-conscious. We worry what people think. We forget that we had that part of ourselves. So one thing I love is to help people find that in a child and have fun and play with movement. And it's a really safe, completely non-judgmental space to be able to feel silly, and then that's fine. So definitely don't need to be able to dance.
It sounds fun. I want you to take me through one. And I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I love it.
Amazing. And one last question. Oh, actually, I've got two more that I'd like to ask you. Is just for fun. Apart from your own family, what three people would you have around your dinner table? And just briefly, why?
Okay, so it's a tricky one. This is hard. So I was just for today. For my dancey person, I'm going to go for Isadora Duncan. I know she's not live anymore, but hopefully I can bring people back for this dinner party.
Yeah.
So she was one of the early pioneers of creative dance, expressive dance, and she ripped off the ballet shoes, got rid of the corset and tight clothes, and danced around, just really free and expressive, scarves flying everywhere, and I just love that about her. Just when you watch her dance on old videos, she's just so free and expressive and so natural, and just expressing her pure energy. And I love that, because I've never been, a big fan of ballet. I like it, but I found it hard. So it's so nice to give a voice to just expressive and free dance. And I'd love to talk to her about that, to find out more about, how she did that. What did that feel like? So she would be one.
Yeah.
And then I would have to have the poet, Benjamin Zephaniah. So he is someone that I've always loved. I love poetry, but sometimes it's not always that accessible. And he makes poetry so accessible, and he has kids rolling around laughing. And I just love that about him. And he's also such an advocate for equality, which is something I'm so passionate about, that everybody is equal and everyone deserves to enjoy poetry. And that's how I feel about dance. So I'd love to have him at my table. He can read us some poems. And then I think I'm going to choose my childhood sweetheart. I'd go for River Phoenix, because I had a massive crush on him as a child. And I love Stand By Me, as I used to know the script off by heart. And it was so sad that he died way before his time. So it would be really lovely just to bring him back and have some nice food with him.
Oh, amazing. So out of everything that you've done so far, Katy, because your journey doesn't stop here, you're going to be making such a difference to people's lives. What would you say, just in brief, is the biggest things that you feel that you've learned from this whole journey for yourself?
Well, one of the things that you have to do when you're training to become a dance therapist is to have your own therapy as well, which I think, it's fair enough. If I'm going to be expecting people to open up to me, I need to be able to open up as well. But before I went, I just remember thinking, oh my God, I don't know. I don't want to do this. I'm so nervous. And what if it's going to make me feel worse by opening up? But actually, it has been really transformative. It's been so beneficial. And I kind of wanted to go back to the idea of the garden. And sometimes in your garden, you have like a treasure chest that's maybe locked, and you've got a key and you don't want anyone else to know about that part of yourself and you want to hide it. But when you do that, actually it just gets heavier and heavier and bigger. So safely working with a professional in a really safe, non-judgmental environment, I was able to open the key and open that lid, and actually now the contents are out and they're not as bad as I thought they were going to be, and they're valid and they've grown and they're much lighter now. They're not always in my mind. I can manage them. I can accept them. So really just wanted to say to anyone else that's thinking about maybe going into therapy that, it will be much easier than you think, and you'll be able to move on and have a really good quality life afterwards.
Yeah. And that's the importance, isn't it? Even like when you're training to be a therapist, you end up actually learning a lot from the people that you work with. You have to explore and dive deep within yourself sometimes, because you might recognize some of those triggers, and it's absolutely okay. So again, going back to that awareness, then it's acceptance, and then you recognize that you are able to overcome it. The importance of working with a professional to take you through that is obviously very valid, because you're actually the one doing the work as well as the client. But you're being educated through that journey, and like you say, it's not necessarily a complete structure. You have a framework of something, but then you're just guiding them on their pathway with wherever they need to go and what's meeting their needs. So that's what so I've really enjoyed this amazing conversation, Katy. I think you're going to have so excited about working with the types of people that you're going to be working with, and I have no doubt that we'll be sharing more things along the way, so you can share some of your knowledge and help people with little snippets of things that they can do even without a therapist. So it's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you, and I'm looking forward to being able to share it with the people that are going to be watching. Is there anything else you want to use with?
Just thank you so much for giving me this platform to talk more about dance movement psychotherapy, because it's been around for quite a few years, but it's still not so mainstream. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I don't have the website at the moment, but it's under construction. But I could leave my email address if anybody wants to get in contact.
Yeah. So yeah, if you just share your email address now, and then I'll put it on a little note with the video of how they can contact you, whereabouts you're based, and
yes.
So what is your email address, Katy?
It's Katy, which is Katy Dunne, DUNNE, dance @gmail.com.
Amazing. Okay. So thanks for sharing all of your wonderful information, and I look forward to sharing more in the future.